Hello Slytherin girlies and general savagery practitioners. This video will be the first in, I hope, a long series of videos that I want to make as kind of an informal book club slash book review on this channel. Since I am home on stress leave until at least the end of the year, it's left me with a lot of time to catch up finally on all the books I've been meaning to read. So I figured if I'm going to be purchasing and reading them anyway, I might as well make some content sharing with you all my key takeaways and insights. That way, if you're interested in a particular book, but you're kind of on the fence about purchasing or dedicating the time to read it, maybe you can get a little more of an in-depth look from my reviews, and maybe I can help you determine whether or not a particular book is going to be worth your time, or whether it's something whether the subject matter is actually going to resonate with you or not. So without further ado, today's book that I'm going to be reviewing is The Game, 41 Shades of Men, The Pursuit to Subdue and Use You by Princella L.R. Clarke, or Princella TheQueenMaker as she is more commonly known out here in these YouTube streets. Just a little preface or disclaimer, I guess, before I begin. I basically discovered Princella's content over, I would say, only recently, the past 2 to 3 weeks, and I was pretty blown away, I'll be honest, on first impressions. She is definitely a very, very gifted orator, a gifted debater. She's able to weave a lot of scientific, data-driven, like philosophical, historical backings into her arguments, which makes her extremely compelling to watch and difficult to, argue back against the thesis that she presents about male nature or anything else really. All of her arguments are very, very well thought out, and that's impressive. But at the end of the day, no one person has the authority to state something as absolute fact. So as much as I was initially really taken in by her stage presence and her intellect and whatnot, after binge watching for about 4 days, my quote unquote obsession faded away just as quickly as it happened. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm just saying that, I'm viewing her from a more neutral, objective lens now than I initially was when I kind of got very excited about how smart and how articulate she was at first. So, yeah, the reason for why I'm kind of over it in a sense now is that as I continued to consume her content and watch her live streams and whatnot, I found that she really only has a limited range of talking points that she tends to repeat over and over again. And this is not like an insult or anything. I mean, it's hard for anyone as a content creator to constantly innovate and bring new conversations, new topics to the table. But the more that I watched of her, the more I noticed that she repeats a lot of the same talking points over and over again, which to me speaks to the fact that her opinions or some of her, you could say, more nihilistic conclusions that she draws about men in particular are very biased and skewed based on her own specific life experience, which there's nothing wrong with. I mean, all of us can only really speak from our life experience, but it's just a reminder to, take everything she says with a grain of salt. So anyway, before I ramble on forever, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I went into this book genuinely, I think, from a place of, if not neutrality, then at least definitely not as a Princella stan, just to make that clear. So I'm reviewing this with as critical of an eye as possible. I'm not just blindly someone who buys and cosigns on every single thing that she says. I don't hate all men, of course. I have amazing men in my family, and I had an amazing relationship with my dad. I miss him every day. Although I do agree and I see the logic in a lot of the things she says, I just don't necessarily trust her 100% because it's not like she's giving us a particularly attractive or realistic solution. Like, for example, this is not really in the book, but if you watch any of her YouTube content, or especially the long form content in her live stream playbacks, she talks about how the only way to rid the planet of all the excess, incel type low functioning males that we have running amok now is just to live in all female communes and not deal with males whatsoever. Even if we want children, we should only reproduce with a high value male in a very clinical sense, but then once the actual conception of the child is done, all of the subsequent childbirth and child rearing that should take place in an all-female community. That kind of talk, I'm not gonna lie, it sets off alarm bells in my head, regardless of whether or not it could technically work or not. The thing that bothers me is that it's just very fear-mongering at the end of the day. It's like, why are you bringing up only, why do you have to bring up the most nihilistic end of the world type scenario every time you talk about this male-female issue that we're having in society now? Fear-mongering is a control tactic that is often used on like less educated mass groups of people, or it encourages mass hysteria and a breakdown in the understanding of nuance. It encourages blind obedience and support of a certain doctrine or leader over critical thought, which is ironic because one of the first things Princella talks about in her book is that she stresses the importance of critical thought. She literally breaks down the steps to how to think critically, which you'll see in a moment. But yeah, I feel like it's so ironic because she preaches for women to develop their own critical thinking skills and be able to question things. However, she herself uses tactics that bank on individuals, or women in particular in this case, not being strong in the area of critical thinking in order to get them to support or join her cause and basically not question anything that she posits. Do you know what I mean? Like, we all know that fear is a very powerful emotion that a lot of cunning, influential figures, institutions, governments, even religious institutions have harnessed and used throughout history to control large groups of people, to get them to do their bidding and, you know, devote themselves to a particular doctrine or whatever. So I'm not saying that Princella is on this world domination dictator level with her tactics. She's just another YouTuber at the end of the day, just trying to get followers, just to keep things in perspective here. But I'm just saying that I do get a whiff of that from time to time. Like, I don't really like the tactics that she uses with the fear mongering and the way that she interacts with her followers sometimes. Like, she uses a lot of, I mean, she would call it tough love probably, but others could see it as berating behavior towards her followers, like using shame and berating them into submission almost, especially when somebody, if a woman comes to her with an opinion or an argument that goes directly against something that she believes in, she'll just kind of talk over that person, not let them finish a single thought, and basically pummel them with a bunch of facts and studies and whatever. Like, that's kind of her go-to defense mechanism or attack strategy whenever she comes upon a woman who is not just completely like on board with her radical doctrine, Sinclair and Hooker. So I say all that to say that I think Princella does have valuable insights, and I will continue to watch her, or if she puts out another book, I would be open to reading that too. Depends on what the topic is, of course, but yeah, I'll be looking at her stuff just for my own sake, if anything, because I like to look at any issue from as many different angles and perspectives as possible before I ultimately draw my own conclusion. So I'm gonna watch her, but kind of like sideways from now on, because I don't trust her fully, and I'm going to draw my own conclusions about men, women, puppies, what have you, at the end of the day. So with that being said, let's get into the book finally. Thank you so much for your patience. Alright, so the game, 41 Shades of Men, The Pursuit to Subdue and Use You, this is basically the crux of Princella's thesis, worldview when it comes to men in general. Like I said, this is going to be a very informal review, so I will throw on the screen right now the entire table of contents so that you can pause and look at the list of the 41 types of men that she is going to go into detail explaining in this book. I will not go through every single chapter. I'm just going to pull up a few pages, a few highlighted portions from pages that stuck out to me, and I will give like personal anecdotes as well, either supporting her claims or refuting. Well, I don't think I have that many personal experiences with men that necessarily refute some of the points that she's talking about. Like the more overtly predator type of men that she describes, I simply have not encountered them on a close personal level. Luckily, thankfully so, right? But because I've never personally engaged with some of the more extreme types, I can't really add too much to the conversation about those types in particular. But yeah, there were parts of the book or certain men that she talks about, certain characteristics that I thought to myself, I've definitely encountered this before in my life. And there were other conclusions that she draws or things that she states are kind of a universal fact for all men that make me call into question maybe some factors that she's not considering. So let's just start with the first excerpt that I highlighted here from chapter 1, the software program of the human being. So the very first question you should be asking here is, whose idea was it to explain this science in this way? And the second question you need to be asking is, what sin? Are you afraid to ask questions? If you are, could it be that you were bullied by your parents or a religious institution to not question, quote unquote, God? So basically here she is stating how crucial it is to question everything that is taught to you. Don't just take things at face value. Asking questions is the foundation or the stepstone of the skill of critical thinking. You need to learn to think for yourself as an individual as opposed to just going along with whatever your parental figures or authority figures or religious institutions, like she says here, drilled into your head as a child. Chances are 99.99% of whatever you were taught serves some particular person or group. And once you figure out who that group or person is, then you can have a clear idea of whether or not this is something that you yourself actually want to, get on board with. And then you can make a more informed, empowered decision based on the real facts. So I totally agree with her. The first step to developing critical thinking skills is to get the courage and the ability to question things, especially things that may be largely accepted as common knowledge or common sense. If you did get brainwashed or programmed to believe or think a certain way from childhood and adolescence, later on, if you reach a point in life where you find yourself questioning the validity of everything that you were ever taught, follow that nudge and intuition and find the courage to ask questions and demand answers, regardless of however the other side may try to shame or shun you into silence. Even if that other side is your own internalized guilt or shame, when you get the courage to ask the question of, why is this statement or why is this system accepted as truth or as the right way of doing things, who does this benefit? Does it benefit me or does it benefit someone else at the end of the day, possibly even at my own expense? The more you develop this muscle, the more you'll become stronger and resilient to brainwashing or social engineering and stuff like that without your consent. So, for example, if you're looking at the terms of a contract for a new job and you read the portion where it says that you have to give 30 days notice if you're going to quit. So if you've been in the habit of questioning things up until now and asking who benefits from certain conditions in the end, instead of just buying into the company and society's explanation that, well, it's the professional thing to do, you need to give people time to adjust to your departure, blah, blah, blah. Why does the company need 30 days notice? Why is that so important to them that they would put it here in, black ink in this contract? Well, it's not necessarily that the company needs it. It's not necessarily that it would break the law if I didn't give 30 days. It would just help them out a lot because 30 days gives them enough time to interview new candidates, find a replacement, make sure that you use up your energy and time to train that replacement. And then at the end of the day, are you better off for it? Probably not. For you, it might have been better just to quit immediately. Maybe you already had a job lined up, so it really was not worth your time to put in any more hours or days at your current position that you obviously want to leave. So again, if you've been exercising this muscle of critical thinking, you would immediately think to yourself, okay, I see what's going on here. It's not necessarily that I'm a bad person or that I'm not professional for, quitting a job on the spot rather than giving 30 days notice. I would just not be making the company's life easier. So what do I want to do? Do I want to make the company's life easier when this is the same company that would let me go without a moment's notice if they had to downsize for whatever reason? Or do I want to make my own life easier, especially if I have another better position lined up already, and it would be easier for me to just peace out immediately, which choice am I going to make as a fully empowered and informed woman? Well, obviously, I'm going to choose the one that benefits me over this random institution, the company. Sorry, not sorry, but I choose me every single time. So, yeah, I thought this was a great message, a great tone to start off the book with. So the next thing I have highlighted is the male's nature is self-preservation. He cannot operate outside of this realm, the realm of the lower self, etc. And then she also has a preface there about how men cannot love based on her definition of love. I don't know, I just feel like the whole arguing over the semantics or the technicality of the definition of love is kind of besides the point. Like, what point are you trying to make that men cannot love by your definition? First of all, doesn't everyone kind of interpret or have their own idea of love that doesn't necessarily coincide with every single other person on the planet? Like, not all women in the world have the same definition of love. So by that fact alone, it doesn't really hold significance to me that you're saying men cannot love the way that you would consider it love, because I mean, I could say that about any other woman that I disagree with on the definition of love as well. So is that really like a man versus woman thing, or is it just an individual basis type of thing? Like, I'm not convinced of anything by her saying that men are not capable of love. Are they capable of protecting? Are they capable of sacrificing their lives for their families, children, women that they care for? I mean, the answer to that is a resounding yes. We have many examples of that throughout history and even the present day. So I'm not really convinced of anything alone by the statement that men cannot love. It almost feels like it's designed to elicit an irrational emotional response from certain women out there that might not have their emotions completely under control yet. And therefore, that makes them easily susceptible to certain people trying to recruit them to adopt a certain doctrine that they're pushing. Could that be your plan all along, Princella? Okay, yeah, it's not that serious, but I mean, my point is that I don't feel any sort of emotional reaction to this statement that men cannot love by some abstract definition that Princella came up with. I mean, I'm sure that it's a good definition. I've never read her other book where she goes into depth about the 5 pillars that she considers need to be fulfilled in order for something to be considered love. But my rebuttal to that is that, well, okay, would you rather a man like risk his life for you and die for you maybe, or would you rather that he didn't do that but he fulfills some lofty abstract definition of love? I mean, I would take the first one because that is applicable to real life. If I was with a man that was doing all the right things, providing, protecting, and if he showed without a shadow of a doubt in real scenarios that he was willing to like put his own safety and life in danger or whatever in order to protect me, then I would be confident in, you know, like the solid situation that I have going on with him. Even if you say that all men don't have the ability to love, that would not make me feel any less secure about the actual dynamic that I'm living out with the man in my life, where he is doing all the correct things and enriching my life in all the ways that I expect. Like, this doesn't intimidate me. This doesn't get my feelings riled up, because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if my man or even my dad, right, like some platonic male relative, if they're consistently showing up and protecting me, providing for me, doing all the right things, and you want to argue that they still don't love you though, I mean, fine, I guess we can just agree to disagree on the definition of love, you know? That's what it boils down to me. Like, you're just arguing over a definition of a word. Okay, sorry, the part that I actually highlighted. The male's nature is self-preservation. This is true, I agree, but again, it's like, okay, she's trying to use statements like these to build the foundation for a rock-hard thesis on why we should take all these drastic actions to completely, like, overthrow the patriarchy and immediately segregate ourselves into women-only communities to protect ourselves from these base humans, these XYs, that when push comes to shove, they're only interested in self-preservation and they're gonna suck the life out of you to accomplish it. I mean, that's what she's getting at here. And I just feel like it's a little disingenuous because, hello, every single living being on this planet is interested in self-preservation at the core. Like, not just men, women too. your pet cat, your gerbil, any living organism who's not like depressed to the point of wanting to, unalive themselves, which is the majority of all living creatures, is interested in their own self-preservation. So I'm sure there's a term for this within debate circles. If anyone knows, please comment down below. But it's kind of like you're stating something that is true for a lot of things, but then you're pinpointing it to a specific group or a specific item to make it seem like that group or that thing is the issue. It's like, okay, let me see if I can think of an example. Sometimes people trip over steps, right? So if somebody, like if a customer was walking into a store and they tripped over the steps leading up to it, and let's say that they sustained a serious injury to their face because of this and wanted to sue the store for having steps leading up to their storefront because steps are dangerous, right? Well, they can be dangerous, but other things are also dangerous. Like a chair can also be dangerous if you get up from it hastily and trip. A ramp can also be dangerous. Like if you want to replace the stairs with a ramp, somebody on a wheelchair could, lose control of their wheelchair and go down the ramp too fast and crash into a car that's coming around the corner and hurt themselves that way. Like anything, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, can possibly be dangerous, A pecan can be dangerous if you accidentally swallow it without chewing and it gets lodged in your throat. That could be life-threatening. So you can't just say, like, if you want to sue the store for having steps in court, you can't just be like, steps are dangerous. That's not going to hold up as a valid argument because you could replace the word steps or stairs with any other word in the world, hypothetically. So like in this instance where she's arguing that the male's nature is self-preservation, so that's why it is fundamentally dangerous to associate with them. Something like that is what she's trying to say, right? Well, if I was trying to debate the opposite point, I could literally say the same statement except replace men with women. So I could say, yeah, women's nature, women's number one priority is self-preservation. And sorry, this is dark, but this example just came to me. So, like, after saying that, I could back it up with a real life example. Like, did you know that most defectors from North Korea are female because it's a horrible thing, but the one advantage that they have over male defectors is that they are able to use their sexuality and their bodies, like their desirability, to seduce officers or just get men to support them. Like when they manage to cross the river to China, they have a better ability of surviving than a man because the chances are higher that either some guard or official or even just whatever male that lives along that area, they have a higher chance of like being sexually attracted to the female defector and therefore being more inclined to help her and give her shelter and whatnot. Sorry, I know that example sounds completely out of left field, but if you think about it, this is kind of exactly Princella's debate style. Like, she will pull all of these, very radical, like, extreme examples or extreme niche studies and then use the findings from that to try to convince you that her argument is airtight, when in reality it might be based on something quite flimsy, like this statement that men are self-preserving by nature. So I'm not saying that I agree or disagree, but it's a statement and it doesn't really move me. Okay, next. Males are always on the prowl for something new and exciting. I'm not going to get into what she writes below that, but this line is absolutely 100% true. I think we can all agree on this as women, right? Whether it be a new dancer at the strip club or the new girl in the office for the corporate girlies out there, that girl is always going to get like the most attention. If it's a dancer, she's going to get the most tips if it's her first week. And she might feel super special for that week, but then once she stays at that club for a little bit longer and the next new girl comes in, she might come to the rude realization that it wasn't necessarily her that was captivating all these clients. It was just the fact that she was the novelty at the time. So what I would say, obviously, in this case is to first not take it personally, like don't take it as proof or evidence that there's something wrong or lacking within you. Just know that this is how men are, this is how people are in general. And if you find a man in your life or whoever taking you for granted like this, simply pick your cute self up and bring yourself to the footsteps or the doorsteps of another man or company, what have you, that actually will appreciate you and all the gifts that you bring. And watch with glee as your previous situation realizes too late that they took you for granted and now they're regretting not treating you better once they see you moving on to greener pastures, okay? But again, this is one of those statements that I feel like could be said for most human beings. Like most people, including women, are very drawn to new, shiny things. We're always looking for the next iPhone model, the next upgraded car or handbag or level up. The whole level up culture is based around this newness. Of course, this penchant for all things new and shiny could turn toxic if overdone, but I think overall it's a good thing to keep in mind when you're trying to advance in the world. So in romantic relationships, they always tell women in particular to keep him guessing, change up your hairstyle, change your wig every day so that he feels like he's dating 5 different women, right? Even if you're married for 20 years, like make it a point to still go out on dates with each other and try new interesting experiences. That kind of advice we pretty much hear all the time when it comes to relationships. But I think this is also a very good thing to keep in mind for other areas of your life as well. For example, career, especially if you're in some sort of creative or artistic field or any competitive field, really. You always want to be reinventing yourself so that people don't get bored of you or adding new skills to your resume. Court attention at all costs, as Robert Greene says in the 48 Laws of Power. Never get too comfortable, like you gotta stay on your toes and always be cooking up something new or ready to pivot to the next opportunity if necessary. Of course, don't overexert yourself to the point where you're depleted, but I'm just talking about the fact that it's a good thing to keep in mind that people are fickle, men can be fickle, so you always want to be sure to hedge that in some way, if that makes sense. Demand testing or no SC-actual contact. This needs to be printed in size 200 font and plastered on billboards all over every country. Like, as obvious as it should be, for some reason this advice keeps getting neglected over and over again, and I am really thankful that Princella put this in such plain black and white terms into this book. So I believe this is chapter 15, the STD man, and I'm just going to read the blurb above it too. Stand your square, do not convince yourself to give into his wishes of unprotected sex. Do not try to be the nice and submissive girl. Do not fall for any excuse he uses to sway your decision on protected sex. Demand testing or no physical contact of that type of nature whatsoever. 1,000 times yes. So in this chapter 15, overall, she is talking about the STD type of man, which is basically a man that is already infected with some sort of disease, and whether out of spite or just the fact that it gets him off or whatever, he derives some sort of pleasure or satisfaction in infecting as many unsuspecting women victims as possible, because it's like, I guess he knows that his life is already limited or ruined in some way by this irreversible disease, so he gets some sick payoff out of making other people, making women suffer for it as well, and like bringing the women that he manages to sleep with down to his level. So in order to avoid becoming victim to this type of man, or any man really, I mean, you shouldn't even get to the point where you find out that your guy is in fact the STD guy. Like, he should have already been thrown out of the mix long ago due to preliminary tests and vetting, if that was the case. But yeah, anyway, the obvious solution is to demand testing before you get intimate with any guy, if you must get intimate with someone. And you better not even be considering that if they're not paying your rent and bills, okay? But yeah, this is 100% something that every single woman needs to hold whatever guy they're dealing with's feet to the fire about. This is pretty much the litmus test to find out if a guy truly cares about you and your health and safety or not. If he gets mad at the mere suggestion of getting tested, it doesn't matter even if he is clean. That means that he puts his own pleasure and sexual gratification, sexual needs over your actual life. and you need to throw him away like yesterday's trash. Like, no man who actually respects you and cares about you as a human being would get mad at you for looking out for your own safety by asking that you get tested. Also, don't just take his word for it, okay? Get tested together, even if you yourself don't need it because you've been celibate for X number of years or whatever. No. You get tested together with him so that you can see with your own eyes that he got a legitimate test in front of you, so that he can't like fake it somehow. He can't fake a positive or a good result to get in your pants, right? You have to be there to see it go down. Because, yeah, you don't know the lengths that some dudes will go to, especially if they're desperate for sex, to get some. So this is an excellent section in my opinion, and I wanted to just highlight it. Males will approach you with the sole intent of stroking their egos and making themselves feel important. Some of them love to be chased, and they love having the power of rejection. Oh yes, this is a total truth bomb as well. I don't think I need to expound on this too much. I mean, in order to tell whether or not a guy is just using you for an ego boost and wasting your time, or if he's really serious, you need to basically just ignore him. If he doesn't make a move to ask you out on a proper date or something like that fairly early in the conversation, then it means that he's just there to waste your time. So you should always have a cut off point in your mind, like 10 messages or 15 messages maybe. If he's still not making a move and just only sending you like useless good morning texts every day, then you're under no obligation to entertain his empty messages and just ignore. This part about wanting the power to reject you is so real, especially if like you rejected him first, or he perceives that you rejected him in some way. See, this is the crazy thing. Sometimes you don't even have to do anything. Like, you don't even know him like that. You all are not even in a relationship or acquaintanceship or anything, but because you happen to be super attractive, or maybe you remind him of like the pretty popular girl that rejected him in high school, because of that, he has some sort of grudge or a vendetta against you automatically, and you can't even, this is not something that you could stop if you tried, because it's not your issue, it's his. Do you see? Like, he wants you, but he also wants to get revenge for his past high school self. So yeah, a lot of these guys, even if they grow up to be super successful and are able to attract women in their adulthood, that insecure high school part of them that remains super butthurt, it's almost like they have this compulsion that they can't stop themselves from creating some sort of scenario in which they quote unquote get to reject you. So you could literally be minding your business or talking to your friends at some club or bar, and you don't know this dude from a can of paint, but because you happen to physically resemble his past crush or lover that jilted him, he will go out of his way to do something completely passive aggressive and weird, like walk past you and step on your shoe or something. That's his way of getting satisfaction off of your back. So I have a funny little story that I told before on my channel. Basically, this guy that I was briefly seeing for around 6 weeks earlier this year in the summer, out of boredom mostly. I wasn't ever super into him. I was just bored, and he was around. He paid for stuff, so I was like, why not? And I'm sure he could sense this, but of course he was trying his best to win me over every date, and it wasn't really working. I was not impressed. So anyway, when I was about to leave on my Dubai trip at the end of July, he started flipping out and trying to start arguments with me about why I wasn't texting him more often, and how like I needed to put more effort into keeping in contact with him. I needed to communicate more when I was out of the country, when in fact, no, I don't need to do any such thing, especially since we were not even officially dating. We went on a total of 6 dates, literally. It's not like a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. So yeah, he was clearly like worried about me landing in Dubai and getting my interest distracted from him by all these guys in Dubai that were probably more attractive and successful than him, who would inevitably approach me and ask me out, which was my plan all along. But yeah, I just ended up blocking him on the Line messaging app because I didn't need to or want to deal with his annoying ass anymore. And I found out later that he actually blocked me on Instagram, even though we never exchanged Instagram accounts. So something happened where I was on my cat's account, and you know how Instagram recommends people based on your cell phone directory? So I saw his name pop up and I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I switched over to my main account and typed his account name in, and nothing came up. Which means that this guy went out of his way to locate my Instagram account, which I never exchanged with him in the first place. So he went out of his way to find it just so that he could block me and quote unquote reject me too in some way because his ego could not handle it. And yeah, it's just pathetic all around. You almost feel bad for them, but then, oh, there was another similar thing that happened in the latter half of the summer with a different guy who was significantly better looking. And I actually found him quite attractive. So basically, we kissed, but then, like, I don't know, long story short, he got pissed that I wouldn't sleep with him. So he blocked my number. And again, it's like he got rejected by me for sex basically. So he was desperate to find some way, any way to reject me as well. And that's why I say, ladies, always take it as a compliment when a man blocks you. That means that you really got under his skin somehow, because men don't block girls that they are indifferent about or that they are putting on the back burner. Like, if he is emotional enough to block you, that means that he felt so rejected by you and helpless by that he had to go out of his way to create some sad little scenario to give him a little bit of the satisfaction of rejecting you back, even though that's not possible if you're already the one that rejected first. Like, you can't get fired and then go back the next day and try to be like, well, I quit, because by that point you wouldn't have the job, so there's no job for you to quit from. You know what I mean? So yeah, I definitely agree with, and I've had firsthand experience with this particular excerpt. Next, as a woman, you should never allow someone to use you as a tool to terrorize another woman. Do not volunteer to be a weapon used in the destruction of other women. Don't feel superior because he gasses you up to do it. She is not your enemy. He is the enemy to himself, her, and you. This one is also a bar. So this technique is called triangulation, right? When men, sometimes they will try to subtly like pit you against another girl, or they try to compare their ex to you in a ploy to make you feel insecure, and then you feel like you need to win his approval by proving that you're better than his ex or his female coworker, whoever, in XYZ area. Yeah, don't fall for it. Just don't engage. Like, don't entertain the conversation when they try this. Pretend you didn't hear and start talking about something else randomly. This is literally it's so second nature. Like, some of them do this so naturally that it's just disgusting when you really witness it in real time. Because think about it, only somebody in the mindset of a true predator 24/7 would naturally just default to this as a way to communicate on a date or something. Well, it's because they know deep down that they don't have any actual positive redeeming qualities that would attract or impress you, so they need to resort to triangulation, manipulation, and coercion techniques. I had a guy once that asked me out at a function that my friend, who is also very attractive, invited me to as a +1. And yeah, he was very charming, very sweet in the beginning, asked me out pretty much immediately, so I agreed to go on a date with him. At the date, almost immediately in the beginning of the conversation, he tried to do this triangulation thing 2 times. It was crazy. Like, the first time he talked about his first girlfriend in college, who he was super serious with, but then she cheated on him and broke his heart, blah, blah. I don't remember. I don't care. But it was basically like, okay, trying to prime me to get into the mindset of like making sure that I'm a good girl and I won't do anything to hurt him like his ex, right? Like, first of all, I don't know you or your ex, and for all I know, you could have been equally in the wrong. So I'm not taking any dude's word for how anything went down in a situation where 2 or more parties were involved. I'm gonna need to hear the perspective of every single party that was involved before I make my judgment. Also, he was in his 40s talking about his college ex-girlfriend. Why? Like, hasn't it been 2 decades? Anyway, the next time he tried it was after we finished eating and we were just chilling somewhere outside. And then he started complimenting me up and down about how he really liked my style and my body. And just out of nowhere, like completely unprompted, started comparing me to my friend who was at the function with me where we all met. So he said that he preferred my body type more because, according to him, my friend was too masculine and too muscular. This girl has a banging body, okay? Like, she does pole dance is super fit and sexy. Like, she's obviously very desirable in her own right. So immediately it was just very suspicious to me that he was like out of nowhere putting down her body type and saying that she was too muscular, that he preferred the much slimmer look that I had, thinking that this was gonna make me feel good about myself, that I would lower my defenses now after feeling so flattered that he ranked me higher than another girl. So now I should be more receptive to his SC actual advances or something. Yeah, no, I'm not the one. Okay. And ladies, please don't be the one either. Please don't fall for this. Whether we want to admit it or not, I think a lot of women are more susceptible to the case in which a guy is gassing you up to make it out like they are ranking you above another girl. It's harder to catch than the first scenario where they're trying to make you feel insecure in comparison with another girl, because when they rank you as higher, it directly feeds into your female ego. But the thing is, if he wanted to genuinely and sincerely compliment you, there is no reason to bring another woman into it, right? He should just directly compliment whatever aspect of you that he finds attractive. Like, there's nothing difficult about that. You have a beautiful outfit on, or I love your smile, I love your eyes. So yeah, just remember, any guy who can so freely compare women to each other or talk down on another woman, especially regarding her physical attributes, if he can like publicly put that down in front of you, that guy is trash. Because first of all, who said that his opinion or his ranking of girls' hotness levels in relation to each other means anything? Exactly. So yeah, this guy, of course, at that point in the date, I lost all attraction to him pretty much immediately, because I'm not impressed that you would throw my friend under the bus who literally did not do anything to deserve to be dragged into this conversation. So I love Princella's advice here. Do not volunteer to be a weapon used in the destruction of another woman. Do not feel superior because he gasses you up. She is not your enemy. This is so, so important. Other women are not your enemy. He is the enemy to himself, her, and you. I love this one. It's just so succinct and to the point. Do not give males anything at all. I would add for free. Yeah. Definitely don't give them anything at all for free, not even the time of day. There are a few things, like you can give them anxiety, you can give them blue balls, false hope, things like that. Let me see. You need to make sure you put your trust in legalities and not in him. So I don't remember exactly what this was talking about, but I'm assuming like don't just take a man at his word. Believe a man's actions, not his words. And also, if he's promising you something big, or like if you're getting married or something, don't believe it until you have the actual marriage certificate signed in your hand, because that is a legally binding document, and you should put your faith in legalities, not men. And then at the bottom there, her advice: do not go into a relationship with a man focusing on emotional highs and lows. Position yourself to reap the financial benefits of your labor. Your time, energy, and help is not free. This is very Shira coded, as much as Princella dislikes to be associated with Shira. Very, very much Shira 7 coded, yes. Whenever you enter any sort of relationship or dalliance with a man, he could be the best, sweetest guy in the world, but just make sure that you always get something tangible, and preferably financial gain too, out of the situation. Even if he's just paying for your bills, make sure that there's tangible compensation for you being there, just participating in that relationship. That way, if anything were to ever go south, like he cheats on you, or even if you guys just mutually don't work out, it won't feel as painful. You won't feel as cheated of all your time, energy, and resources, which it's still a loss, but at least it will soften the blow if you can leave with as many gifts, money, and tangible things as possible. 100% agree with this. I love to see Princella and Shira 7 have some common ground. How to know if he fetishizes you. So this is from chapter 26, which talks about the fetish man. Okay, this one is a doozy. We could go into a whole rabbit hole about this, because fetishes also include things like, some guys have fetishes for women of certain ethnicities, which is always kind of creepy, because it's like, as women, we're already objectified enough at large. Add on top of that a race fetish element, and it's just like this doubly weird objectification that happens where they project onto you even tenfold more than usual. Like, you're basically You're not a human to them by that point. You're just some sort of doll or ideal, like a unicorn that they fantasized about, and you can totally feel it in conversation with them because there's just such a disconnect. Anything that you say to them, even if it outright directly disproves whatever like stereotypical assumption that they had about you, it just goes in one ear and out the other because they don't regard you as an actual human in the first place. It's weird. But yeah, I'm not going to go too deep into that subset of fetishization today. Let me just read what I highlighted. So I'm just going to focus on number 1. He obsessively speaks about an odd trait about you. If you pay very close attention to his subconscious speaking patterns, it will be the first thing he mentions and something he mentions quite frequently at different times in the future. So I don't have any serious examples of where this played out in my life, mostly because I would be able to pick up on any weirdness pretty early. Like if I sensed a guy was fetishizing some part about me, whether it's my race or age or the fact that I look much younger than my age, I would suss that out pretty quickly and just stop talking to them early on. And yeah, the age thing, that's always like the grossest one, is when the guy is in his 50s or 60s, which is already way older than my real age of 35, but then later on come to find out that he assumed I was 23 or 25. So it's like, okay, you're literally in your 50s approaching someone under the assumption that she is 23 on purpose because you were actually aiming for a real 23-year-old, right? Like, it's so gross. That's another reason why, okay, I have no problem with age gap relationships in general. I feel like there's plenty of examples where couples have made it work, and not every single older guy that ends up with a younger woman is a total creep and cradle robber. But I realized in my case, because I do look so young, and I realized a lot of older men, especially non-Asian men, they tend to legitimately assume that I'm 25 or something. So yeah, even if a guy is 45, let's say, and I'm 35, while technically that's only 10 years difference, it's not a big deal on paper, but it depends completely on the context. So if it was a 45-year-old guy approaching me thinking I was 23, I would have alarm bells ringing off in my head, of course. If he was 45 and had a more accurate grasp on my real age, like 30 plus, I would consider it maybe. A good rule of thumb for older men in general is that if there is actually a genuine connection where the woman just happens to be much younger and he takes a liking to her, so it's not like he was actively seeking out a much younger woman. Usually if the man is a stand-up guy, he will probably be the one against an age gap relationship in the beginning because he would be well aware of the stigma of dating a much younger woman, and he'll probably try to convince you to meet men your own age and stuff first before jumping into a relationship with him. You would almost have to be the one to kind of go out of your way to let him know that you're interested in him despite your age differential. That's probably like the only relatively safe scenario I can think about dating an older man where it wouldn't be a red flag. I also wanted to show you a real life text I got from a guy I met on a dating app that kind of is like a pretty dead on example of the point made in number 1 of how to tell if a guy is fetishizing you. So you notice how he literally, his first message to me is that, oh, I love how small and tiny you are. Not how are you, not my name is such and such, nice to meet you, how are you, Ren? Just straight up, you're small and tiny, that's what I like. So clearly you cannot get any more obvious. The only thing on his mind is like his physical attraction to me or the fact that he has a thing for small petite women. Now, this is not a crime necessarily. Like, he didn't say anything incriminating. It's not offensive per se. And you see, he even tried to save himself by giving a more generic, safer compliment, following up with calling me classy and elegant. But yeah, the point is that he gave himself away immediately, that okay, he's probably obsessed with and fantasizes about the idea of being with a small, tiny woman in whatever capacity because that's probably his fetish. Needless to say, the conversation fizzled out pretty quickly after this. So again, it shows that he was not interested in getting to know me as a person at all from the beginning. He was just totally fixated on that physical attribute of mine. And that was pretty much it. So I just wanted to add that little example in there to help you ladies recognize the signs to look out for when a guy might be fetishizing you from the jump. The good news is they're not very smart at all about hiding it, so most of the time you can tell pretty easily. A seldom visit makes a longer friendship. Seldom visit maintains a mystery and protects both parties from the dark side of human nature. So this is just the age-old adage of absence makes the heart grow fonder. I agree, and you should definitely employ this in your dealings with men. Make yourself sparse, have your own thing going on, and don't give them too much of your energy or time. No matter how much you may like a guy, just don't make yourself too available. It's not attractive to anyone. The person who has the ability to reject and deny has power. This is so true, yes. This is why they're so obsessed with getting back at you or finding an opportunity to reject you after they've already been rejected by you, even if they have to artificially create the scenario themselves. Patriarchal philosophies have demonized emotions and painted them as a form of weakness. In actuality, emotions are a form of weakness for the male because of his inability to control them. This is not true for women. Women's brains are wired to control emotion. Again, I totally agree with this. I only have a couple of highlighted portions left, so I'm just going to read through them. I don't have any more in-depth discussion or points that I wanted to add to these. If any of you have additional thoughts or personal experiences that you want to add that relate to these, please feel free to comment below. Okay, to summarize this up, males are seeking to get their needs met at your expense. The only reason they are with you is because you fulfill a need. They are incapable of love, therefore they can't love you. There she goes again, with that radical statement. I'm not saying that there's not a kernel or a grain of truth in what she's claiming here, but I don't like it when people speak in absolutes. I feel like something is amiss. Somebody definitely has an agenda whenever they speak in absolute terms. Find love within yourself. Stop seeking outside yourself for something that men are not capable of giving you. Now, this one I can get on board with. Definitely, you should always cultivate an internal locus of control, meaning that you get your validation from inside and not outside. And that is the end of my Princella TheQueenMaker 41 Shades of Men book review. Girlies, I have been at this for the past 5+ hours, probably closer to 7. My voice is completely shot, so I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to give you this nice, concise summary of the whole book. All I can say is that I give it a 7 out of 10 rating overall. So as you could tell, there were quite a few gems throughout the book that jumped out at me. That's why I highlighted them. But even out of those, I just felt like there was nothing super revolutionary that she said. Nothing that I didn't already know. She didn't necessarily bring up any type of man or the type of toxic behaviors that they tend to exhibit that I didn't either firsthand encounter myself at some point in my life or hear about through secondary sources. But all in all, I mean, I like the fact that she has a lot of good advice in here aimed at preserving women's energy, keeping us safe, literally, physically, and mentally. And yeah, she has a lot of gems in here that would be helpful to, I guess, women who are still learning how to vet men better. So there's potentially life-saving advice in here for some women. And in that sense, I do think that it's a net positive. So yeah, with that, I am going to go to bed. My voice is completely shot. My arms are shot from typing this damn script all night. Let me know in the comments if you have any book recommendations for next time. Until then, stay safe. I love you and bye.